Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Welcome to C3. Welcome to our weekly teaching, our weekly podcast. I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Ken Dobson, and I'm the lead teacher here at C3. If you don't know what C3 is, check us out on the web, c3westmichigan.org. We're a values-based spiritual community. And we hope these teachings help. If you're a longtime C3 person and you support this place and make it happen, I want to say thank you. Especially now during all this madness, all the COVID and the shutdown, and really, truly grateful for your support. And also, I want to say we hope you're finding these weekly teachings helpful in some way. Whether you're a longtime C3 person or you're new or you just randomly are watching this on the web, we hope you hear something that helps, that's challenging, that's encouraging, that inspires, that provokes, that expands your mind. I like Rilke's famous line, the poet, "I live my life in widening circles that move out across the world." That's what kind of person I want to be. And we hope that the conversation that we're hosting here at C3 around values and around meaning, we hope in your own way, you're finding that your life is moving in widening circles. To sound fancy, I was going to say widening circles of consciousness, but consciousness has become one of those like fancy spiritual words. But I mean, and it's certainly for good reason. What I mean by consciousness is who we think we are in the world. And what is the world? And what do we really know about the world? That kind of thing. So we hope this is an expansive experience for you. And I just started a new series, which I'm calling Meaning Matters. And it's going to last 12 months. And each month, I'm going to focus on a different word. A word that I think is meaningful. A word that I think is an important part, or it has certain invitations for all of us in the 21st century. I'm doing words that might need some cultivation and some understanding. They might point the way to something. And this month is about wonder or awe. I could have used awe, A-W-E as well, but wonder. And one of the questions I asked the first week I did this word was, what is wonderful to you? What gives you that feeling of being leveled by the world, by life? What's wonderful? What do you already know is wonderful to you? What's your relationship like with wonder or awe? Or are you, like I am sometimes, being sucked down the vortex of bad news? And its flood of be afraid, watch out. And see, it's funny because human evolution, we know that the human brain is hardwired in a way. I hate using, I'm sorry, I'll apologize for that. I don't like comparing the human brain to a computer by saying we're wired, but I guess it's a good enough metaphor. But we know that the human brain clings to negative things, clings to negative emotion, clings to negative experience, because that's part of the survival strategy. And we need it. None of us would be here if our ancestors weren't afraid and didn't cling to negative experiences to learn from them. But it also, at a certain point, can become pathological and take over and color everything. And the vast majority of life and the vast majority of our experience of just being alive just passes right by us. And the wonder and the beauty of just ordinary life just slips through our fingers like sand. So I think part of a growing spirituality, you could say, or a growing healthy psychology, I think asks us to have a relationship with wonder, with awe, and to cultivate it, and to savor those moments that just open up before us. So that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to do two things. I want to read a passage from Annie Dillard, and then I want to talk about the story of the Fisher King, which I mentioned last week. I'm going to do kind of part 2 of the Fisher King. It's a story that I've been studying and reading about, or sometimes called the Holy Grail, or the Quest for the Grail, or the Grail stories, or sometimes it's called the Parzival story. So all of the above. I want to talk just a little bit more about that story because I think there's something interesting in it, which I pointed out last week, but I want to kind of do part 2 of that story. So that's where I'm going. That's the terrain we're going to try to cover today. So first to Annie Dillard. This is from Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. And I probably should have found this. Here it is. This is from chapter 6, her chapter on the present moment. So she begins this chapter by trying to describe this experience she has where I think she's at a gas station, she's petting a dog or a puppy, she's looking at the mountains, and for lack of a better word, or for lack of a better way of putting it, read the book, she finds herself completely enveloped in the present, probably not thinking or planning, just pure being. Those moments that we're as if we're falling into life itself without any commentary. She finds herself in one of those moments, and the moment she realizes she's in that moment, she loses it. And that's what the chapter is about. What is the present? What does it mean to be present? And can we live in the present? There's a lot of spiritual-ish advice about just being present. Well, just be present. Just be more present. What does that mean exactly? And can you do it? Or is being a human being a little more complicated than that? So that's what this chapter, in a way, is about. The fleeting nature of these moments. So here's what she says. Catch it if you can, meaning the present. Catch it if you can. The present is an invisible electron. Its lightning path traced faintly on a blackened screen is fleeing and gone. Just gone. That I ended this experience, the one I just described with the mountain and the dog and the gas station, that I ended this experience prematurely for myself, that I drew scales over my eyes between me and the mountain, and gloved my hand between me and the puppy, like a layer between, is not the only point. After all, it would have ended anyway. After all, it would have ended anyway. I've never seen a sunset or felt a wind that didn't end. The levitating saints came down at last, and their 2 feet bore real weight. No, the point is that not only does time fly and do we die, but that in these reckless conditions, we live at all and are vouchsafed for the duration of certain inexplicable moments to know it, to know that we live at all, and to know that it ends. See, there's something about this passage that reminds me of the nature of wonder and awe. It seems like to cultivate, to experience wonder and awe, it's right between the present moment, just pure being. It's right between the present moment and impermanence, that it's going to end. And in fact, it's consciousness that life is impermanent, that the moment is impermanent, that it's fleeing and fleet and gone. That reality is what evokes that sense of wonder. If you're just present, that's not necessarily wonder. You're not bringing additional consciousness. Maybe the monkey mind isn't happening at all, and we need moments like that. That's what a good meditation practice can begin to hone or cultivate, just a letting go of the commentary reel and a sinking into the moment. And once that happens, and maybe it happens only by accident, like you stop to get gas and you look up at a mountain, it will end. And the moment that intrusion comes that says, everything is impermanent, it's gone. The present is gone. But it's at that moment, at least in my view, that something like wonder can awaken. How did we get here at all? How did any of us get here at all? I'm sitting on my porch right now, and there's a squirrel. I just saw a woodpecker land. The squirrel is looking for black walnuts. Now, these aren't filling me with negative emotion. I'm not clinging to them. I'm not in survival mode. But life is happening all around me, and it's impermanent. I'm only here for a short time. All of us are only here for a short time. And that kind of awareness, that kind of consciousness, I think, is the beginning of a life of wonder, of awe. Again, I'm saying it's situated somewhere between the present and our own impermanence. And maybe that's all I want to say, maybe just initially, from some opening thoughts from this Annie Dillard passage. The second thing, part 2, I want to talk a little bit more about the Parsifal story. And last week, here was the connection that I made. So Parsifal is this kind of sacred fool. And he goes on the big quest, the big journey of life, and he wants to become a knight. And his mom says, okay, she doesn't really want him to go because his father was a knight and he died. So she said, okay, wear this special underwear that I made for you, which always makes me laugh, and don't ask too many questions. That's her big advice. And he goes out into the world, and pretty early on in the story, he bumps into the Fisher King, or the Wounded King. And he's brought into the castle, and before him is a banquet. And there's this special lance that's brought in. I think there's a sword. There's a table full of everything you can imagine to eat. And eventually, the Grail itself, the cup of Christ. By the way, the story is older than Christianity, most likely. So Christianity sort of morphs with it. But the sacred Grail, which is kind of the vitality and fountain of life itself, is brought out, and everybody continues to feast and dine, except the Wounded King. He can't, because he's been wounded for a long time, and he's living under a kind of spell. And unless someone comes into the Grail Castle and asks the right kinds of questions, he can't be healed. So every time a guest comes, there's a big banquet, and there's this anticipation, is this the one who's going to come and ask the right kind of questions in order to heal the king and thus heal the kingdom? Very interesting story. And so what I was connecting with last week is that the very pursuit itself, the quest, in other words, is rooted in question. To have a question is to be on a quest. And there's no expansion of consciousness if you're not asking questions. And just across the board, how are we to live our life in widening circles that move out across the world if we're not asking basic questions? If you don't ask questions, you're not on the quest. And the possibility for, I think, a richer, deeper, more expansive consciousness remains elusive. You sit in the castle wounded. And I'll say some more things about the Fisher King in a second and how we got into this place. But I just think that's interesting. And in the 21st century, what kind of person do you want to be? A person on a quest, questing, asking questions? And what I said last week is that behind the desire to ask questions, I think, is wonder. What is my relationship to life? Do I think I know it all? Am I certain about my worldview. I've kind of got it, buttoned up and packaged nicely, and it's just working for me. Is that what kind of person I'm going to be? Because I guess that's an option, but the story seems to be saying that you'll end up wounded with half a life if you're not asking the right kinds of questions. And anything at all can open us up to, what is this world? Who are we? Who is my neighbor? I mean, really? I saw this documentary. I haven't watched it yet. I read Outside Magazine, and they were talking a bit about it. And after the election in 2016, this runner decided, like Forrest Gump style, to run from North Carolina to, I think, San Francisco, to run across the country. So I'm going to watch this documentary. So I don't know if it's any good. I can't say. The idea is what struck me. I was like, wow, how interesting to conclude, which is what he did. I don't know very much about my own country. What if I ran across it and just met people? See, that's someone on a quest. That's someone who's asking questions. That's someone who has a spirit of wonder and awe. What is this place? How did any of us get here? Who is my neighbor? And that kind of thing is missing right now, at least in my view. Or it's not valued in the way I think it should be valued. So let me come back to the Fisher King story just for a couple of minutes. So a couple things about how the king got into this position in the first place. There are a couple of stories that are related to how the king ended up wounded. The one, probably the oldest one, is that he was out one day as a young king, and he saw a salmon roasting on a spit. And he went over, and salmon is kind of one of those almost deities in Celtic culture and also in other parts of the world. It's that there's something mysterious about the salmon that spends its life in the ocean and then gives itself away sacrificially up the river just for the next generation. So it was honored, revered as a kind of sacred being. And anyway, he sees it and he goes to grab some of the meat because he's starving, and it's too hot and it burns him. And he doesn't know what to do, so he sticks his finger in his mouth and it wounds him. And the wound never heals. And the story is saying something like this: early consciousness, that expansive consciousness, is wounding in some way. It's almost too much. And we walk with a limp is the idea. And the question becomes, how is that healed? If there's a first awakening to consciousness, like we leave the Garden of Eden, so to speak, what about, how is that integrated? See, consciousness, like I was saying before with the Andy Dillard story, the moment you realize, oh my God, I'm having a moment, the moment you realize it's over and life is short and we're all going to die. So my point is that any kind of consciousness can also wound. Once you see, you can't unsee. And that's just the way it is. The other story with the Fisher King, the wounded king, is a story of where he meets another knight, and they lower their what are they called, lances, and they charge one another. And the one knight has seen a vision of the true cross, and the wounded king, or the Fisher King, is on a kind of sensual, passionate search. So you have nature, sensuality, passion, and you have a true vision of the cross. Maybe that's order or logos or something like that. Maybe it's eros and logos, and they go at one another, nature and order, and there's a wounding event. That's what life is like. And the sad thing is that maybe both parties are wounded. Or the two sides of our nature are wounded. And the question is, how do we heal? And the story says it directly. You heal by starting to ask the right kinds of questions. And the question is, I'm going to give it to you as clearly as I can right now. What is the point of consciousness? What is the point of knowing? What's the point of it? What's the point of enlightenment, if you want to put it that way? What is the point of knowing that life is beautiful and meaningful, and also it's fleeting and short and impermanent? What is the point? And unless you're asking those kinds of questions, you're not on the classic quest. You might just be sitting in your castle complaining about your wounds, like the Fisher King. He's called the Fisher King, by the way, for two reasons. One, the fish part of the story, but also the only way his pain is alleviated is that every once in a while he goes out fishing and he feels a little better. And I can't help read this through the lens of depth psychology at this point, because fishing and water is often a symbol for the unconscious, especially in dreams. So as long as he's fishing, he feels a little better. And maybe he's fishing around in the unconscious or something like that. That's my guess as to why he's out fishing. Okay. Now, maybe I don't want to say too much more about the Fisher King, but let's fast forward really to the end of the story. So if you remember last week, and if not, I'll just tell it to you, the Parsifal, the holy fool, comes into the castle and he's shown everything and he sees the Grail, but he remembers his mom's advice and he doesn't ask any questions. So what happens is the Fisher King, the wounded king, is not healed, and Parsifal is sent out of the castle and he has to go on the journey again. So before Carl Jung ever came up with first half of life, second half of life, that was his idea, there were stories like this that was saying something like, the first half of life, you get to experience certain things and you get glimpses of certain things, and you even get glimpses of glorious things, consciousness itself, meaning, but it can't be integrated. You haven't learned the right kinds of questions, so you get kicked out and life just happens to you and you're suddenly in the second half. And in the second half, I won't tell you the whole story, Parsifal wanders again, this time for something like 20 years, until he has the opportunity and finds himself back near the Grail castle. And he remembers the advice he first heard, which, yes, there's a castle. It's just down here and to the left, as if it was there all along. Just walk straight ahead and then go left, and there it is. And here's my point today. The question that Parsifal is to ask, and is finally ready to ask, is this: whom does the Grail serve? Whom does the Grail serve? In other words, consciousness itself is not for our personal benefit. Enlightenment is not for our personal benefit. Knowledge of any sort, like science, technology, the arts, from the point of view of the story, is not for our personal benefit. It might benefit us in some way, but that's not the point. The ultimate question of growth is, whom does the Grail serve? That's a certain orientation toward life. That's a certain openness toward life. And the posture that I'd like to suggest that's needed for us to ask the real questions of the quest is rooted in wonder. Rooted in that kind of humus, earth, humility, humbleness that says, who am I? What do I really know? And also, I know a lot. Both of those things. It's like just a kind of posture toward the inexplicable nature of life itself, that we're here at all. To hint at some Annie Dillard here. That kind of posture takes us on the path to asking the right kinds of questions. Questions like, whom does the Grail serve? Whom does the Grail serve? And there's something else that I think is powerful about the Fisher King story here, because it's saying, in its own kind of strange mythic terms, that to be a human being, or maybe I should say this way, to be a mature human being is to orient your life around service, around your life being for the life of others in your community, others of the world, others of nature, any others. That's what a mature person looks like. And if you don't ask those questions, like, whom does the Grail serve? Or any kind of consciousness that I've stumbled into, what's the point of it? Who is it helping? If you're not asking that, you're just wounded. You just sit in the castle, festering, waiting for some outside savior to come in. And that causes a kind of illness and sickness in the kingdom. So the thing that wakes it up, of course, is the question itself. And what I'm saying is that the act of questing requires a certain amount of wonder or awe as a starting place. Now, I want to end sort of in a weird place, because this week I was noticing, God, I sound like a broken record because I keep complaining in a way, although complaint maybe isn't the best way to put it, about the fire hose of bad information that's coming at us all the time, and negative information and scary information, and be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And there are things that can hurt us and kill us and harm us, not just COVID-19, but a whole host of other things. And anyway, so this week I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how I get hooked, and it sucks me into a vortex, and I don't even get to experience like just the beautiness of ordinary life, like the saint coming down from levitating and putting his or her 2 feet on the ground. And I started to ask this question: is there any good news? Like statistically, how scary is the world? And I want to read you some statistics that really surprised me. And these are from credible sources like the World Bank, like the US Census, University of Pennsylvania. So here's something that I thought was interesting. In the last 25 years, more than 1 billion people, in the last 25 years, more than 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. Wait a minute. In the last 25 years, 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty, abject poverty. Now, who's talking about this? Who's mentioning this? I mean, you would think we would be celebrating in the streets that this is the case. That 1 billion more people in the last 25 years have enough to eat. That, to me, that just floored me, like, wait a minute. Maybe the 21st century is not that bad. Here are some more. This got me thinking about poverty in general. This is from the US Census. The American poverty rate right now hovers around 10%. And this is for all ethnicities, okay? And it's down from 14% in 2014. So let me just repeat that. In 2014, the United States poverty rate across all ethnicities was around 14%. Now it's 10%. Huh? Who would have thought? Like, okay, what kind of world do we live in? Maybe people do care about their neighbor. Maybe some of the efforts organizations and governments and ordinary people have made in the world are making a difference. Okay, here's something else. Now this ought to get us seriously dancing in the streets if you can walk, all right? Life expectancy in 1920 was 39 years old. Life expectancy globally in 1920 was 39 years old. In 2010, it was 79. Okay, wait a minute. About 100 years ago, you could be expected to live to 40. I'm 40 something, 4 years old. I made it. I beat the odds in 1920. So something is happening. And I'm telling you, the massive leaps in science and technology, probably in both these respects, in terms of clean water, access to clean water, basic economic resources, electricity, not to mention vaccines and modern medicine and tools that are associated with modern medicine. Yes, that's the main reason. That is something to celebrate. Okay. Death. Now, here's where I'm not trying to be careful because I know we're in the middle of a global pandemic, but I just want you to hear this. Death by infectious disease has fallen by 90% from 1900 to the present. Death by infectious disease, the thing that we're facing right now, has fallen by 90% since 1900. Do you see? Like, okay, what kind of world do we live in? Whom does the Grail serve? So what I'm saying is that right now I'm feeling there are a lot of problems, and there are a lot of problems in politics. And yes, you should, vote, and these things matter. And yet there are massive things that are worth celebrating. What kind of world is this? Where science, technology has done some good in the world. We're a lot less prone to die from infectious disease than at any point in human history, and has fallen by 90% in the last 100 years. That to me is incredible. So what's my posture like toward life, toward the fact that I've been vaccinated for diseases that killed many, many millions of people? Like, I just dismiss all that as if it's just like, I'm just like anybody else. I'm not like anybody else. Not if you go back in time. There's a certain kind of privilege just of being alive right now that our ancestors didn't have. There are certain advantages to just being alive right now that our ancestors never had. Let's not forget, women couldn't vote. Black people were 1/3 of a person. That wasn't all that long ago. Now, I'm not glossing over any of the hardships right now. I'm just saying, what is my posture to life? And what if I could turn with a little more wonder toward the fact that I'm alive at all? And if so, maybe I'll start asking bigger questions like, what's the point of my life? Is it me, my rights, my point of view, my ideology, my way of saying, my way of speaking, my speech? Or is it maybe it could crack open toward questions that are like the Grail question? What am I here to serve? Who am I here to serve? What if my life, like the salmon in the story, is really about giving itself away for future generations? That would be a big vision. That would be a big vision worth pursuing. So that's where I want to end it today. Thanks for being a part of this place. I hope you heard a hint, a guess, a clue. I wish you the very best safety and health and well-being and meaning this coming week. Peace.